Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk a little bit about active reading, and what active reading is kind of the first step to analysis. And analysis is, really looking into the articles or essays that we will be doing our critical analysis on. So active reading is kind of like the first step in that process. And the reason why active reading is important is because, well, honestly, academic reading can be kind of boring from time to time, especially if we're not super interested in the topic. And beyond maybe not being super interesting, it can also be somewhat challenging to get through some of the more complex texts that we have. Maybe reading isn't our thing, isn't our strong suit. Maybe we just don't like reading about this topic. Maybe it's just, not our thing. If that's the case, active reading kind of helps us become engaged. And even if it's our favorite topic, sometimes being told you have to read about something might naturally instill a little bit of disengagement into that content. And even for pleasure reading, active reading strategies can kind of help you really dig into something that you already like. And active reading strategies are strategies that you already employ on some level or another whenever you read anything. Now, our MindEdge software offers a couple awesome suggestions, and we're going to kind of review all of them, and then we're going to talk a little bit in depth about my favorite one. Okay, active reading strategies. It'd be helpful if I did not move our screen, right? Active reading strategies. The first one is engaging in pre-reading inquiry, and what this is essentially you kind of just get a feel for the essay or the article that you're reading. Maybe there's an introduction or an abstract or a summary that you can read, or maybe even just reading the title and the author, and see if you recognize it. Have you ever read anything else by this person? Have you ever read anything in this genre? If there is an introduction or a summary that you read, does it raise any questions? Have you ever read about this topic before? Can you make any connections to anything in your past that you might be familiar with or have read about before? So it's kind of just critically thinking about how you might already relate to or understand the topic or the author that we're looking at. The next example is taking notes as you read, and you can do this one of two ways. You can take notes in a journal or a composition notebook or even in a Word document on your computer in a separate entity than the actual article yourself. So you just kind of open up your notebook and start taking notes in. You can also do annotation, which is my favorite. An annotation is actually taking notes right on top of the article. Print it out, or you can even do this in Microsoft Word or online. There's annotation software that you can get for free, and you just take notes on the article itself. And we're going to look at an example. It's my favorite one. I find that for me it's the most engaging. The next one we sort of talked about with our first strategy, the pre-reading inquiry, is making connections. This is where you read and you kind of ask yourselves questions about the content that you are learning. Can you personally relate to anything that the authors are talking about? For instance, in the McFadden article, being in the career that I'm in, I have to be super aware of my pronouns. So maybe I can relate that experience with what she's talking about with the over usage of gender neutral terms. That kind of stuff. Is there anything in your education, in your history, in your personal life that you can connect to with this article or essay to make it more interesting, to engage with it more? Another active reading strategy is summarizing your text. And essentially what summarizing is just putting it in your own words. What I tell students typically when we do summarizing activities is, tell me about the article. Pretend I haven't read it. So if you were going to talk to me about this article, how would you say it? Okay, so put it in your own words, summarize it. And this helps you kind of break down what the author is talking about in your own natural way of understanding. Okay, so we can summarize the text too, and then you can also apply what you've learned from your reading. So say you're reading an article, talk to somebody about it. It's very similar to summarizing the text, except maybe not the summarizing part. It's talking, it's engaging with it. So you read the article, you read the McFadden article, and you get a really powerful reaction. So you talk to people about it, like I've been talking to you guys about it the past couple videos that we've had. By reading something and then talking out your feelings, your responses, the questions that it brings, you are critically engaging with that piece of literature so that you are starting to process it, make connections, and understand it, and critically think about it even more. Okay? So these are all different kind of active reading strategies that our MindEdge, there's my fan, sorry, that our MindEdge software kind of encourages you to do. And they're all great. They all have super good benefits, but maybe they all don't work for you. So I encourage you to practice them and go with whichever one really kind of helps you actively engage with that article. Now, I mentioned that annotations are my favorite ones, and I actually did annotate our McFadden article. I know that it's kind of hard to see, but you'll see that there's some highlighting there, some red ink, that kind of stuff. So I actually like to print out the articles and I scribble all over them. But what exactly do I mean by annotations? Well, let's take a look. Annotations. Let me see if I can get this small enough for you. There we go. This is a Prezi, and I often use Prezis in my classes because they're a little bit more engaging than, say, a PowerPoint. And if you're ever interested in how to do a Prezi for this class or another class, let me know and I'll walk you through it. Okay, so annotations, it's helpful if we think about it as having a conversation with the text. Well, how do we have a conversation rolling with a piece of paper? It's very simple. Don't overthink annotations. It's taking notes on that piece of paper. Take a pen, take a highlighter, take a pencil. If you do it on the computer, type it out, use the highlighting functions, anything, just get something in your hand and actively engage with that text. Have a conversation with it. Reading is not a passive activity. You need to have a conversation and engage with these articles. Annotation is just taking notes. Highlight interesting, important information, underline quotations that you might want to include in your critical analysis or whatever paper you're doing. This works for any reading, not just what we're doing in this class. Circle words you don't know. Academic writing can be very challenging sometimes, and if you don't know a word the author's using, circle it and then look it up later. Then maybe you'll add to your own vocabulary. Write commentary in the white spaces, such as like, oh wow, this is super interesting, or I wonder why the author's saying this. In my own example, I make comments about how she uses the phrase neuter over and over, and what my emotional response to that was. Write questions or connections in the white spaces too, such as, say you've read something by McFadden before, or maybe you read McFadden and Amy Tan, one of the other articles that we could use. Are there any connections there? Are there any connections to your real world life? That kind of stuff. Scribble all over your articles. Have an active conversation with it. Take notes, highlight, color, circle, draw. Whatever you can do to draw attention to important concepts to you, wherever you can make those connections. Okay, so let's look at an example. This is an example from an article I had to do for my own studies, and so we're just going to kind of take a look at what annotation for me kind of looks like. Okay. Whenever I start annotations, the first thing I do is write the citation at the top. And we're going to get into citations really soon, and citations are connected with the documentation style that we use. And we will either be using MLA or APA in this class, and we'll actually take a little short quiz to determine which one is best. And we'll have lots of support for learning those new doc styles. So I don't want you to worry about it too much yet. But I always put the citation information at the top because I'm super forgetful, and in academic writing we always want to be sure to include that information. Okay. And then you just want to engage with the text, circle things, highlight things, that kind of stuff. Let's see if I can't get it in here for you to kind of see. For instance, I circled the word semantic. I don't know what that word means when I read this, so I look up the definition. I look at what maybe isn't included, what's not focused, see how I'm writing comments all over this, and I kind of identify the pieces of the article as well. Highlight interesting points, make comparisons, what are the differences in what this author's talking about. I circle interesting words. I look for evidence, have a conversation with the text. Scribble all over it. Okay, let's get ahead of ourselves. Yeah, there we go. Look for citations that you could mine to add to your research. In this class, we don't have to use outside resources, but if you were interested in doing so, you could. And maybe for future classes, you might be required to use outside resources. And one of the things that we can do is mine citations from the articles that we use. So if your author used any articles, look at the references they use and maybe find one that you can use. This is another good thing annotation can help you do. It helps you kind of dig into that information, highlight or circle or underline the important bits, write down your actual reactions as you're reading them, and maybe look for more information through their own citations. Using your pens, pencils, post-its, highlighters, whatever you need to use, and engage with your article. And that's one of the reasons why I like annotations so much, because they help you kind of just engage and keep track of your notes, with your thought process. I always get asked by students, Rowan, what is the point of annotation? Why do you like it so much? Well, it helps me understand the text better. It helps alleviate boredom. Remember, sometimes reading can get a little boring for us, but if we are actively kind of digging for interesting words, we're writing down our responses, our emotional gut reactions, making connections, it kind of alleviates that boredom aspect just a little bit. It helps you get a clear understanding of what the author's talking about, what the purpose of that article is, what your own response to it is. It helps you question, problematize, and think critically and actively about what you're reading. It takes you out of that passive role and puts you right in that active role. And it helps you develop an idea of what you want to discuss. Remember, for our critical analysis, we're going to be really deeply analyzing this article, this essay. So by engaging through annotation, you are making notes on what ideas you're having about the article. And it's going to help you in the long run because you're going to have your notes right here on this handy piece of paper or in that file on your computer. So that is some examples of active reading. Annotations, my favorite. You don't have to do annotations. I strongly encourage you to try, but they're not required. Find which active reading strategy works best for you, and let's do it. Let's engage with these texts. Alright, as you're doing your module activities, let me know if you have any questions. And remember, you got this.